In this video, I'm going to go over everything you need to know regarding the driving on the tracks in the Star Cup. It's worth noting that a few of the driving strats I go over in this video might not have much value to you when actually playing these tracks online, but I figured I'd bring them up anyway just in case you're looking for something new. And yeah, as always, I'll be going over the Shroomless lines, the shortcuts, and the coin routes. Be sure to check out the rest of the How to Play Mario Kart Deluxe playlist as well. The link is in the description. But without further ado, let's get her going, bud. And just before getting started, if you enjoy this video, consider subscribing. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your minds. Sunshine Airport may seem like a basic track at first glance, but there are still some pretty neat things you can do here. Going into the first turn, you want to perform a left drift and charge up a regular mini turbo. As you're on the straight before the ramp, you want to hold wide, then left as you trek off the ramp in order to get a launched mini turbo trick. As you land, begin a left drift, release it into a right hop, and trick on the left side of the crates. This can be pretty precise with Wiggler though, so I'd only do a launched mini turbo trick here if you're really comfortable with it. On Scooty, it's really easy, so you should be able to do this almost every time. Now, on this straight, for whatever reason, it's actually faster to slide a bunch before the boost ramp. I have no idea why that's the case, and as far as I know, it saves barely any time, so you probably shouldn't worry about it. Regardless, perform 2 left slides just after passing the second coin into a trick off the ramp. You only want to trick if you have a small number of coins though. With 10 coins, you'll go way too high and won't be in a good line for the following turn. I usually trick if I have 5 coins or less and drift if I have 6 coins or more, but I think experience will help you determine what to do given your coin situation. Once you're back on the track, perform a left drift and charge up a super mini turbo. Once you're on the straight, release it into a right hop and a left hop, positioning yourself toward the right ramp and trick. Doing this hop pattern will also make charging a super mini turbo around the next turn much easier. So yeah, begin a right soft drift as soon as you land on the bottom path, and when you find yourself to be in the same line as the right coin, release your super mini turbo into a left hop, into a neutral hop, into a left drift. You then want to charge up a regular mini turbo by soft drifting as much as you can without putting yourself in a bad line, then holding wide until you get it. Release it into a right hop, into a left drift. Nothing too special here, just release another mini turbo before the next straight and position yourself toward the right coins. Just before hitting the glider ramp, you want to hop, and if done correctly, it will get your glider out much quicker and save you some time. Hold right and down on the cannon glider and immediately begin a right soft drift as you land. You want to release a mini turbo as soon as you get it, immediately into another right drift, which you'll hold for a wee bit. I'm not the best at this next part, at least in terms of getting all 3 possible coins, but what you want to do is charge up an ultra mini turbo and release it on the right side of the glider in low glider fashion by releasing and pressing R or ZR as soon as you leave the glider ramp. You want to consistently hold left in some way, dive down for almost a second, and ideally hold back and left until your ultra mini turbo runs out. Land about halfway into the landing zone next to the left grass patch and begin a left drift shortly after. I personally do a left slide immediately after landing, but you don't have to. Release a mini turbo into a right drift on the final turn, and while on the left side of the conveyor belt, perform a launched mini turbo trick. This may be situational given the crate's position and how tight you could potentially go, but that's about it. Summing it all up, perform a mini turbo trick or a launched mini turbo trick off the first ramp and trick again on the left side of the crates. Remember to trick off the boost ramp if you have a low coin count and drift if you have a high coin count. Release a super mini turbo on the next straight and trick off the right ramp. Release another super mini turbo into a left drift. Do 2 mini turbos before the 2 boost panels and position yourself toward the right side of the glider, in which you'll hop just before touching the glider ramp. Soft drift and release a mini turbo as soon as you can into another right drift. Hold out an ultra mini turbo and release it in low glider fashion. Consistently hold left while holding forward for almost a whole second, then holding back until your ultra mini turbo runs out. Land halfway into the landing zone, charge up a mini turbo around the next turn, perform a launch mini turbo trick off the side of the conveyor belts, and would you look at that? It's just another day in the office. There really isn't much to talk about regarding the shortcuts and strats here. You have the shroom spot, which is done by drifting off the right ramp and shrooming as tight as possible into a super mini turbo on the main road as shown here. It's pretty easy. You also have the top path. While it's slower, not many people take it as a result, so this could be used as a breather or just to get some space if needed. Also, you don't have to worry about this little grass ramp. It's the most useless quote-unquote shortcut in the game. And at the end, you have the grass patch, which you can shroom through. And here's what the final trick looks like when you have space in between the crates to trick tight optimally. This track is pretty good for easy coin collecting. When driving tight, while it can be a bit of a hassle collecting all 3 possible coins on the glider, at least for me, you can collect up to 10 coins in one lap. I mean that literally though, not 13, 12, or 11, exactly 10. So it's not the absolute greatest, but thankfully there are a few alternatives for coin collecting. You have the right coins at the beginning, the wide coin after the boost ramp, the coin on the top path, the 3 wide coins before the boost panels, the left 2 coins before the cannon glider, and the wide 3 coins on the second last turn. So yeah, you have some options for sure. Just do me a favor and never go wide here. Trust me, it is not worth it. You can only get 1 coin at best, and you lose so much time over here. But that's all there is to the driving on such an airport. Let's see what Dolphin Shoals has in store for us. In my opinion, Dolphin Shoals is just a really fun track to drive overall. The start of the race is pretty basic, just a normal mini turbo around the first turn. You can also get a super mini turbo here, but it's super precise. Either way, on the next straight, the fastest strats involve tricking off the right edge of the left ramp, then the left edge of the middle ramp. I personally only go for this on the middle ramp online, as getting both tricks without getting too much air can be a little tricky. Regardless, begin a left drift as you approach the next turn. You can either wait a bit and easily charge a super mini turbo, or go early and release an ultra mini turbo. The ultra mini turbo method is faster, but you won't be in a bad position using the super mini turbo method. Regardless, position yourself toward the right path. You want to perform a neutral hop as you approach the pipe and perform an up trick off the current. Position yourself in the middle of the boost ramp and perform a down trick while holding back and right. I personally find doing an up trick here easier, but the down trick requires fewer inputs for the same result. I've just been doing the up trick since 2017. Regardless, you want to aim to land on the right of the boost ramp. You need to be careful here though, since it's possible to clip the pipes and get really screwed over. That's why I like to stay to the very right. When you land, perform either a left, right, or neutral trick to get minimal air from the current. Now here comes the juicy part. You want to shake your controller on the eel and get as many good tricks as you can. To continuously get good tricks, you need to stay on the concave side of the eel stripes. As you can see here, if I were to go on the left side of the eel or the convex side, I'd only get 1 trick at best. You'll have to switch sides later on as shown here, but in general, your early tricks are the most important, so if you screw up your alignment at the end, it won't be the end of the world. You can get up to 7 tricks, but 5 or 6 are enough to benefit you a lot. Regardless, once you land back on the track, trick off the ramp and immediately begin a right drift. You want to charge up an ultra mini turbo and release it on the straight before the glider. This isn't absolutely necessary online, but you can do a right hop before tricking off the ramp, then soft drifting until your glider releases your mini turbo for you. This isn't hard, but because of its precision, I wouldn't recommend doing this in the pack. Regardless, you want to land from the glider as soon as you can, and at this point, you just want to continuously chain mini turbos until the finish line, or until you charge a super mini turbo around the first turn on the following lap. Putting it all together, you want to either get an easy mini turbo or a precise super mini turbo around the first turn. Ideally, you want to perform 2 tricks off the edges of the right and the middle ramps, but getting both isn't mandatory for success. You then want to either charge an early, somewhat precise ultra mini turbo or a late, easy super mini turbo, and release it as you position yourself toward the right path. Perform a right hop before up tricking onto the right path. Position yourself toward the middle of the boost ramp and down trick, or up trick with a bit more inputs while holding back. Land on the right boost ramp before the eel and perform a left, right, or neutral trick. Remember to stay on the concave side of the eel stripes and shake your controller to get some good tricks. Trick off the next ramp into a right drift in which you'll charge up an ultra mini turbo. Release it on the straight before the glider and perform a right hop just before tricking off the ramp, immediately into a left soft drift as you land until your glider releases it for you. Land as soon as possible and continuously chain mini turbos to finish your lap, and yeah, that's the way she goes there, bud. There are a few shortcuts to talk about here, and they all more or less are in the same spot, at the very end. The first one I'll talk about is pretty useless nowadays, but you can shroom through the ending off-road cut back into the water. But again, it's pretty useless going into 2021 because of the glider strat. Shortly after landing from the ramp, you want to perform a right slide off the glider ramp until your glider pops out. You then want to hold both back and left, but not too much if you only have 1 mushroom. Shroom as your character is clearly gliding to the left. You want to position yourself toward the middle of the main path as you glide past where you would otherwise land, and you should barely be able to glide until the underwater section. This is way easier and way less precise with multiple shrooms. And if you're in serious sweat mode, you can turn on tilt controls. Tilt your controller left and hold left on your stick. And yeah, it's pretty insane. The tight coin route is pretty meh for the most part. You'll get at least 4 coins when taking tight lines, or more depending on how many coins you can collect while on the eel. But these are tight lines, and while there are few options for coin collecting, there are a few sets of coins very early on that will help you a lot. You have the 2 coins before the middle ramp, the 2 sets of 3 wide coins on the second turn, and the coin in the middle path. There are a few others, but these are definitely the most significant. And with that, that's Dolphin Shoals for you. Let's see where Electrodrome takes us. In my eyes, Electrodrome is a pretty fun track to drive as well. When your race starts, you immediately want to hold left and begin a right drift as soon as you can, then mini turbo trick off the glider. You don't want to do this if you want to dive down for the coins though. So you want to stay airborne for some time and land just before going over the second stair. Perform a left drift as soon as you land and soft drift when you can to charge up an ultra mini turbo. Depending on how long it takes, you may need to perform a right hop into a right drift rather than immediately beginning a right drift. On the first anti-gravity turn, you want to charge up another ultra mini turbo, which you can release as soon as you get it. Now, in general, you want to stay in a tight line, but when front running, it isn't a bad idea to punch out a mini turbo or two on the straight. I haven't tried this with Wiggler, but with Scooty, you will save a bit of time. Either way, position yourself toward the right path and begin a right drift as you approach the next turn. You don't need to slide as I do here. Charge up a super mini turbo and release it as soon as you get around the turn, immediately into a left drift. Soft drift as much as you can in order to charge up another super mini turbo. Release it into a right hop into a right drift while positioning yourself toward the 2 coins. On the final anti-gravity turn, soft drift and release a mini turbo as soon as you get it, immediately into another right drift. Soft drift where you can and release your ultra mini turbo off the glider in low glider fashion. You want to hold back on the glider just until you reach the final ramp. Just don't get too close to the point where your glider won't go away. But yeah, trick off the ramp and begin a left drift as soon as you land. When you get around the final turn, release your super mini turbo and immediately begin a right drift. From here, you want to pop out 2 mini turbos like you're snaking before the glider section. In a lap 3 situation, you can just stay in a straight line after your super mini turbo. Putting it all together, you want to immediately perform a mini turbo trick off the glider and stay airborne until you approach the second stair. Charge an ultra mini turbo around the next turn and do an extra hop onto the anti-gravity section if need be. Charge up another ultra mini turbo onto the big straight. You can do a mini turbo or 2 on the straight if you'd like. Take the pink path and perform a right drift as you approach the next turn. As you get around the turn, release a super mini turbo immediately into a left drift and charge up another super mini turbo. Perform a right hop into a right drift, release a mini turbo as soon as you get it, immediately into another right drift, which you'll release an ultra mini turbo from in low glider fashion. Hold back and slightly left while on the glider and land just before tricking off the ramp. Begin a left drift as soon as you land and release a super mini turbo around the final turn into 2 snaking mini turbos before the glider on the following lap. You gotta do what you gotta do, bud. Yeah, there's only one shortcut worth mentioning here. To shroom through the ending shortcut optimally, you want to aim for the 4th arrow from the left as you're drifting to the left. Drift off the ramp and shroom shortly after you land. This alignment will allow you to cut inside the tight pipe. If you soft drifted where you could, release your ultra mini turbo before getting out of the off-road immediately into a right drift, which you'll use to mini turbo trick off the glider. It's pretty sick. The only other thing to mention here is the optimal glider when collecting the first 2 coins. You want to dive down with an up trick, and after your character's trick animation is done, hold back and right to get both coins while remaining airborne. This one is pretty cool as well. This is a pretty solid track for coins. Even though you can only collect 4 coins when taking optimal lines, you have many options. You have the coins at the beginning, the wide 2 or 3 coins at the start of the anti-gravity section, the green path coins, the circling coins after the glider, in which you can collect up to 2 without losing speed, and the wide 3 coins on the final turn. So yeah, you should be covered for coins for the most part. That's all there is to Electrodrome though. Let's get the job done on Mount Wario. Alright, so going into Mount Wario, I'm going to change things up a wee bit. Because this is a section-based track, I'm going to go over each section's driving lines as per usual, but then I'm going to summarize each section individually. But other than that, Mount Wario. This is a pretty fun track to drive. The start of the race isn't too fancy, just trick off the ramp onto the snow. You can get a mini turbo trick here, but while this is faster, it'll probably hurt you online more than it will help you. So just drive straight. Once you land, begin a right drift as you approach the S turn. While this part of the track is pretty basic, remember to position yourself toward the 3 coins as you release your first mini turbo. You want to perform your average mini turbo trick off the ramp and begin a right drift as soon as you land. Take the top path and release a super mini turbo on the straight before the ramp, then perform a left hop and trick off the ramp. You want to begin a left drift as soon as you land and soft drift around the next turn to charge up an ultra mini turbo, which you'll release on the next straight as soon as you get it. Perform a right hop and begin a right drift shortly after. You want to hold wide as you approach the turn skip and begin holding tight a little bit before the gap. When playing online, I'd advise against going for the wall clip and just hopping in between the ramp and the wall. It's much safer, but if you always get the wall clip in time trials, then it's not a bad idea to go for it. Just make sure you don't approach it too wide to the point where you'll get bumped hopped out of your line. But once you land, you're given her on section 2. Summarizing section 1, the start is pretty simple. Trick off the ramp, get a few mini turbos around the S turn, and get a mini turbo trick off the ramp before the ice. Begin a right drift as soon as you land and take the top path. Release your super mini turbo and trick off the ramp. Begin a left drift as soon as you land and charge up an ultra mini turbo, which you'll release on the straight before the turn skip. Then begin a right drift and charge up a super mini turbo, which you'll release as you hop in between the ramp and the wall. Now, let's talk about section 2. You want to begin a right drift as soon as you go over the anti-gravity strip. Charge up a mini turbo, which you'll release immediately into a right drift after collecting the first coin. Aim for the final coins line or the third arrow to the left as you drift off the ramp and soft drift while in the air to charge up an ultra mini turbo. Release it either as you land or just before landing. This next part is a little risky if you do it optimally, but you can get a significant edge over your opponents and it looks really good. Trick off the first ramp and immediately begin a left drift. You want to soft drift for the most part. Hold wide at the very end, then tight to perform a launch mini turbo trick. The safest way to get back on track afterwards is to perform a right slide as soon as you land, then trick off the ramp. If you hold right while in the air, you'll have a bit more room once you land. When you land, immediately begin a left drift and perform a launched mini turbo trick again. This one won't save as much as the one before, but it still looks pretty sick. Regardless, trick off the next boost ramp and begin a right drift as soon as you land up top. Going into the next turn, you want to release a mini turbo before going over the gap into 2 left slides before tricking off the ramp. Begin a left drift as soon as you land. Soft drift around the next turn and hold wide as you go over the anti-gravity strip. Once the anti-gravity animation is finished, release a super mini turbo into a right hop and trick off the ramp. Now, it's a little situational how you attack this boost panel section, but what I like to do is begin a left drift shortly after landing to drift over the first boost panel, get a mini turbo before the next boost panel, then naturally hop over the water before the final boost panel. Shortly after going over the boost panel, perform a right hop into a left drift. Quickly charge up a mini turbo and release it immediately into 2 right hops into a trick. As the trick boost runs out, begin a left drift on the right path. Try to go as wide as you can before doing a right hop into the snow cut. Make sure to do as many neutral hops as necessary while you're in the snow cut, and then go off the glider ramp. To go down quickly to get the tricks off the logs, hit the left or right wall as you go off the glider. At this point, I like to land in the middle of the first log, then trick. I also like to shake my controller in this section just to guarantee the tricks. If you land all the tricks, you'll probably trick over the final log, which is great. Begin a right drift as soon as you land from the last log you tricked off of, exiting the log section. This method won't let you cut inside all of the trees on this turn, but it's a safe trick method for sure, and considering you're getting tricks and you're safe, like, it's pretty sick. So stay on the left of the first 2 tight trees, then cut inside the final tree on the turn and release a super mini turbo immediately into a left drift. Soft drift where you can, and as you go into section 3 and the next straight, release your super mini turbo without a hop afterwards, then trick off both ramps. So to put all of section 2 together, begin a right drift on the anti-gravity strip and release a mini turbo on the first coin and begin a right drift. Drift off the ramp and release an ultra mini turbo as you land. Trick off the first water stream ramp, perform a launch mini turbo trick off the second, a regular trick off the third, and a launch mini turbo trick off the last. Reposition yourself and trick off the next boost ramp, begin a right drift as soon as you land and release a mini turbo over the mini gap, then trick over the next ramp. Once again, begin a left drift as soon as you land and release a super mini turbo after the anti-gravity animation ends, then trick off the ramp. You can either drive straight or drift over the first boost panel, then release a mini turbo over the next. Whenever you're going straight into a boost panel, remember to hop over the water. Shortly after going over the last boost panel, perform a left drift and release a mini turbo before the next ramp. Shortly after landing, begin a left drift on the right path and stay as wide as possible before hopping into the snow cut. Hop as much as you need to in the snow cut and trick off the glider ramp on the left and hit the wall to dive down quickly. Aim in the middle of the first log and continuously trick until going over the final log and immediately begin a right drift. Go inside the final possible tree on that turn and release your super mini turbo into a left drift, and there you go. Section 2 is just another day in the office. Let's finish up on section 3. So like I said, release a super mini turbo without hopping and get a trick off both ramps. Begin a left drift as soon as you land. Release your mini turbo after the first downhill turn and shortly after begin a right drift. Do the same for the next turn, but immediately go into a left drift. After this next turn, position yourself toward the coins and release your mini turbo into a right drift. You could get some extra air, which is nice. I like to aim for the second right ramp when I'm not going for a double in the middle. Release your mini turbo into a left hop and continuously trick off the bumps. I also like to shake my controller here. Perform a left drift as soon as you land from the final bump and charge up a super mini turbo, which you'll get and release as you go over the anti-gravity strip. At this point, just go over the first 4 boost panels while driving straight, then perform a left slide off the 5th boost panel into a right drift. It helps if you bump into the left wall to be in a good line on the glider. Anyway, let your glider release your mini turbo and go through the 3 rings. You want to land shortly after the downhill section below you. You don't have to do a left slide as I do here, but you do need to begin a right drift. Release a mini turbo into a left drift, soft drift as much as you can around the final turn, and release a super mini turbo before the finish line. Altogether, release a super mini turbo without hopping before the first ramp on section 3 and get a trick from that ramp and the next. Begin a left drift as soon as you land and release a mini turbo almost immediately into a right drift. Do the same for the next 2 turns. Release your mini turbo into continuous tricks off the bumps and begin a left drift as you land from the last bump. Soft drift and release a super mini turbo on the anti-gravity strip. Drive straight as you go over the first 4 boost panels and do a left slide on the 5th into a right drift on the last 2 boost panels and the glider ramp. Bump into the wall and let your glider release your mini turbo. Go through the 3 rings and land shortly after the downhill. Begin a right drift, release a mini turbo, and begin a left drift immediately. Soft drift around the final turn, release a super mini turbo on the final straight, and we finally covered the Shroomless lines on Mount Wario. I know this is a section-based track, but this was way longer than I expected, so let's go, dude. There are a few shortcuts to go over here. First and foremost, by hopping into the off-road after the first 3 coins and shrooming, you'll save quite a bit of time. This can be super beneficial when starting the race, either for you or for your team. Now, regarding the split path nearing the end of section 2, you could shroom through the snow cut, but you could also take this alternate route on the right path. By tricking off the ramp onto the boost panel as shown here, you'll be about even with the people who take the Shroomless cut. Well, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe a bit slower? I don't know for sure, but It's an option. It's an option. Finally, the ending shortcut. Nothing too special, just shroom through the snow patch. If you hit the wall as you shroom, you'll have a much easier time getting a super mini turbo. It's pretty not bad. Obviously, because this is a section-based track that isn't N64 Rainbow Road, yeah, you'll easily have more than 10 coins available to you when driving tight. But really, the only non-tight coins that are worth mentioning are on section 1. I don't even think there are any coins outside of your normal route on section 2 and 3. So yeah, you have the 4 wide coins on the bottom path at the beginning of the ice section, the 4 wide coins on the top path, and the 4 wide coins around the turn skip. This goes to show how difficult it can be to collect a ton of coins after the first section of this race, especially after the first 4 coins of section 2. But, believe it or not, we're finally done with Mount Wario. I hope you got something out of this video. If you did, I'd really appreciate it if you liked the video and subscribe if you haven't already. And yes, your boy is back from his break. I rested up and I'm super excited to get back on the grind. I've got some cool ideas in mind and plan on hustling like crazy, at least for the next 4 months. I've talked about a few things outside of my channel already, so if you aren't aware, join my Discord server and find out. But until next time, thank you so much for watching. Have yourselves a fantastic day and keep on giving her, bud.